to all my students of class 6. Today we shall continue with the lesson Major Landforms on Earth. Now in this lesson we are going to learn about next landform feature, and these are known as the plains. So what are plains? Now plains are large stretches of flat land. They are generally not more than 200 meters above the sea level. Some plains are extremely level, and most of the plains have been made by the rivers and their tributaries. And most of the plains are also very fertile. Now most of the people, they depend upon the plains because plains are very fertile. So most of the agricultural products are got from the plain regions. Okay. Now we will have a look at the different types of plains. Now there are three different types of plains. First, you have the depositional plains. Second, you have the erosional plain. And third, you have your structural plain. Now, under your depositional plains, we have the flood plains. Now, how are flood plains formed? Now, you know that a river already has water in it. Now, during the monsoon season, or sometimes the level of the river water may rise to a great height and flood the areas. Isn't it? That means the level of the water is going to rise and the extra water is going to move towards the land. But later on, when the river recedes, that means now the volume of the water in the river is going to become less. Now what it leaves behind are the alluvial soil or the fertile soil. So this is how your flood plains are formed. For example, Indo-Gangetic plain in India is formed in this way. Now next you have your deltaic plains. Now when a river originates in the mountainous region, now it passes through various stages and finally it has to empty its water into the sea. But during its course of its journey, what happens is the river is going to carry a lot of sediments along with it. Now it has to reach the sea. It has to meet with the other rivers. But in the plain regions, now what happens is the speed of the river also decreases. So it cannot carry all the sediments, it cannot carry all the sand particles along with it. Now what it does is, it leaves it at the mouth of the river in the form of a delta. Okay? So this is known as your deltaic plains. Example, the Sundarbans in India. Now, next you have your coastal plains. So most of you have been to the beaches, isn't it? So you've seen it is covered with sand. But sometimes, now this sand particles, it gets carried away by the wind or it gets carried away by the waves further into the land. That is inland. Okay? And then it forms a plain region in the inland. So example, you have the western eastern coastal plains which are formed in this way. Next you have your glacial plains. Now you know what glaciers are. Glaciers are huge mass of ice that slowly slips down the mountain ranges. So the glacier carries a lot of mud, silt, isn't it, or alluvial soil along with it. And then what it does is, now it slowly starts to melt and it deposits those particles at one place, isn't it? So thus forming your glacial plains. For example, the northwestern Eurasia is formed in this way. Eurasia is a place in between Asia and Europe. Okay? Now, next you have the lava plains. Now, you have seen or you must have seen a volcanic eruption. So what happens in a volcanic eruption is that the volcano erupts and then the lava comes out to the Earth's surface. So as more and more lava comes out to the Earth's surface, it hardens, it solidifies and stretches over a vast area of land. So later on, these form your lava plains. Example, the Deccan Plateau in India is an example of lava plains. And then you have your lost plains. So what are lost plains? Now, the winds, okay, they carry fine particles of loss, okay, those are small particles from the deserts and barren land and deposit it somewhere else, okay. So this forms your lost plain. Example, the Wango in China is formed in this way, okay. So these are your depositional plains. Now we move on to the erosional plains. So how are these erosional plains formed? So these erosional plains are formed by the agents of erosion, namely your wind, your river and your glaciers. So on the erosional plain, you have peneplain and glacial erosional plain. Now, there might be highlands, okay. Now, a river might be flowing over the highland, or maybe strong winds might be blowing over the highlands, or maybe it is exposed to the glacier. So now the level of the highland is going to get reduced because a lot of erosion is taking place. Erosion means the smaller particles are being carried away by the wind, by the rivers, or maybe by the glacier. Now the highland gets reduced to a much lower land. Okay? So this is how your peneplains are formed. For example, in India also, the Hazaribagh Plateau in the Chota Nagpur Plateau have been formed in this way. Now next you have your glacial erosional plains. Now glaciers, as these are huge mass of ice, now when it is slowly flowing down the mountain ranges, it is going to scorch. That means it is going to scrape, or it is going to carry a lot of rock particles, sand particles along with it. And then it is going to deposit in one part of the earth. So this is how your glacial erosional plains are formed. For example, the prairies of Canada. So these are your erosional plains. Your peneplain and your glacial erosional plain. And finally, we move on to the structural plain. So what are structural plains? Now these are structurally depressed areas of the world. That means in the beginning itself only, these are depressed regions. Depressed means some sort of a hollow-like feature is formed on these particular areas. So they are not affected by any Earth's movement. So they have remained in the same way for a very long period of time. Okay. Now, example is your Great Plains of USA. So these were your different types of plains. Okay. So namely your deposition plain, your erosional plain and structural plain. Now, finally we move on to the last landform feature found on the surface of the earth. So these are your islands. So in your previous class also, more or less you have an idea about what actually an island is. So an island is a piece of land that is surrounded by water on all its sides. That means a mass of land is there at the center and it is surrounded by water on all its sides. Now sometimes the islands may have reef. Reef means small marine creatures which have been able to form the island. And sometimes you have groups of islands together, okay, cluster of islands together. So these are known as your archipelago. And sometimes you can also have an atoll, okay, that means a ring-shaped island. Now we will have a look at the different types of islands. Now there can be four kinds of islands. Now firstly, your continental island. Second, your river island. Third, your oceanic islands. And fourthly, your coral islands. Now let's have a look at what actually a continental island is. Now a continental island is a part of the mainland. Okay? The continent might be there, but since these places might be very close to the water bodies, very near the ocean, now as time goes by, what happens is this part of the land is going to get submerged. It is going to come under the water, isn't it? And then it recedes away from the mainland. That means it moves away from the mainland and remains in the ocean. Okay? Now, so they get detached from the mainland. And example is the Sumatra and Java off the coast of Asia and Greenland off the coast of America. Now Sumatra and Java also, they were a part of the continent of Asia, but now they are away from the continent. So they are now in the ocean, isn't it? Or they are surrounded by sea. In the same way, Greenland was also a part of America, but now it has been detached from the mainland. And then it has now come under the category of an island. Now secondly, you have a river island. Now the rivers, as I was discussing in the previous lesson also, the river, when it is about to reach the sea, it deposits all the sediments at the mouth of the river. And here, now what happens is, an island can be formed there. Okay, that means a piece of land will be there at the mouth of the river, and then it can be surrounded by the water bodies, or it can be surrounded by the water. So example, the Majuli Island in the Brahmaputra river. Next you have the Oceanic Islands. Now Oceanic Islands are small islands which are found in the deep oceans. That means they are away from the rest of the land. Okay? They are found in the middle of the ocean. For example, the Mauna Loa in Hawaii and Azores in Hawaii are some examples of oceanic islands. And then now you have the coral islands. Now how are these coral islands formed? Now in these islands you have small marine organisms which are known as coral polyps. And then later on what happens is the marine creatures are going to die. Okay? And then the skeleton remains. So the skeletons, they secrete the calcium carbonate, and later on they harden to form like rock-like structure. Okay, so this is how your coral islands are formed. For examples, the Corave and Maldives in the Indian Ocean. And usually these coral polyps, okay, they can survive in temperatures which are warm. Not in cold seas, okay, but where the temperature is warm, because it suits the survival of these coral polyps. So we have had a look at the different types of islands. Okay, so mainly your continental, river islands, oceanic islands, and your coral islands. Now, before we conclude the chapter, now it is very important for us to know now what effects do these landforms have on the people. So what sort of effect is felt by the different landforms, or maybe by the movements of the different landforms. Okay. Now firstly, the movement of plates. So you know that the Earth's crust is in constant movement, isn't it? The plate tectonic movements is always taking place. So now when the movement of these plate tectonic plates is taking place all of a sudden, then we experience earthquake. So when we experience earthquake, what happens? The entire population gets destroyed, isn't it? So whatever features are made by the human beings, it all gets destroyed. Now people have to start their lives all over again. And then with regard to the structure also, now there might be some areas which might be where it might have soil or rocks which are very hard, on which constructions can be done, isn't it? Or on which a large amount of people can build their houses. And then there might be other areas which might not have very firm soil, or you might not have very firm rocks where you can build your houses. So they are prone to landslides, isn't it? Or maybe you are unable to build houses there. So it affects the human beings. Now they have to decide where are they supposed to construct their houses. Whether they are supposed to construct it on a place where the soil is very fertile or where the soil is firm. So decision lies in the hands of the people. Now climate. The climate of a place is also going to affect the lifestyle of the people. That means if you are living in a very cold region, isn't it? There's no question of you getting plenty of food, because maybe you are not able to grow crops there. So you have to think of a way, or you have to think of means by which you can survive the harsh climate. Or maybe there might be some areas where there is no availability of water. Maybe the desert regions, isn't it? So how are you going to survive in those areas? So these are also all landform features. Is it maybe a mountainous region or maybe a desert region? Now how are you going to acclimatize to such situations? And at the same time now, regarding the costumes also. Now the people living in the hilly regions, the clothes which they wear are different from the people of the plain regions. That means the clothes which the people wear in the plain regions are different from the clothes which they are wearing in the mountainous region. So this is also, why are they wearing different types of clothes? This is also because of the different landforms on which they all are living. And the landforms are also going to affect the lifestyle of the people. Now especially in the mountainous regions, now there is no question of agriculture being practiced there, especially at the foothill of the mountains, because the landform is not very plain there, isn't it? It is quite steep. So maybe people go and collect firewood there, or maybe they take the occupation of grazing a large amount of cattle there. And then when it comes to the plain region, the occupation which they have adopted is different, isn't it? Maybe they are very much into agricultural activities, or maybe they are involved in construction work. And then when you come to the plateau region, now plateau regions, now since they are very rich in mineral products, now they can get a large amount of minerals from these plateau regions. And then maybe industries can be set up there whereby the use of these minerals can be made. Okay? So the landform features in one way or the other affect the lifestyle of the people in one way or the other. So with this, we come to the end of the lesson, Major Landforms on Earth. Now, for your assignment, you will be given the assignment in the WhatsApp group. Stay home, stay safe. Thank you. Have a nice day.